First off, I'd like to say that for those of you propagandists who can't be bothered to watch my videos from start to finish, be sure to check my questions at the end of this video. Before releasing his new series, White Noise, Astrobrant2 released a video entitled Questions for Jarrah White, in which he asks me whether or not I agree with Bill Kaysing and or Ralph Renee on various points. Or at least what he claimed was their various points. Most of the questions have nothing whatsoever to do with the moon hoax, and are typically a misrepresentation of their true beliefs. Still, I answered all his questions. Astrobrant seemed angered by my answers, and released a follow-up video.
YouTube enthusiast, conspiracy theorist, compulsive Apollo antagonist, and aspiring woo-woo celebrity Jarrah White has kindly deigned to answer my questions regarding his beliefs in the crackpot notions of his ideological ancestors, Ralph Renee and Bill Kaysing. The link to the video where I asked 31 questions is over in the sidebar. And now we have the results. First, let's look at the totals. 8 were yeses, and these included the claims that NASA murdered the Apollo 1 and Challenger crews.
I have already thoroughly discussed the Apollo 1 fire in an earlier video. As far as the Challenger crews, as you will see a bit later, and as regular viewers should already know, astronauts tend to deny or downplay the stars that they would have surely seen whilst orbiting on the daylight side of the Earth, or while standing on the surface of the Moon.
We were never able to see stars from the lunar surface or on the daylight side of the Moon by eye without looking through the optics. I don't recall during the period of time that we were photographing the solar corona what stars we could see.
I don't remember seeing any.
And yet, Russian cosmonauts and Spaceship One pilots happily and openly talk about the stars.
And when I got up there and could see the stars and see the planets, it was a religious experience. I honestly thought I had reached out and touched the face of God.
It is widely known that Krista McAuliffe was an outspoken and opinionated woman who refused to be scripted by her government handlers. It is unlikely that NASA could have kept a woman like her on a leash when it comes to keeping quiet about the stars. This is where Ralph Renee and I part company. He believed the Challenger was shot at from the ground by a guy with a rifle, which chipped the ceramic solid rocket shell and caused it to leak burning hot gases from the top of the booster and blow the external tank.
The detail, there is no detail on these two ships here, the booster rocket or the ship. That's the poorest film I've ever seen taken of this operation. The one the TV camera showed was clear and bright and everything was distinct. Look at this, blurry. Why? That's before the explosion. It shouldn't be blurry. This flash here was not the starting flash. What I saw is, I think it was this booster way up on top, right about here where you see the second post. That's where it jumped. A bolt of flame came out of the solid booster right into the belly, diametrically even. It looked like it was a square hit right in the center of the fuel tank here. Now, as soon as the thing starts leaking fuel, the diaphragm, which is someplace here, is unbalanced. It breaks. They all mix together, and everything goes boom. And this boom here probably was somewhere near the diaphragm, which would probably have been the place that it would have blown through and out. That hit the command ship. The command ship did not destroy that rocket. It was a booster. So if this thing had been properly shot, or they had showed you the scene that I saw from the commercial television stations, you'd see that lance of flame coming out from someplace right about here.
I'm not ruling out Renee's theory, but after studying the Challenger disaster more closely, it is my firm conviction that NASA deliberately launched in cold weather, which thus froze the solid rocket booster's O-rings, caused the plume leakage, and blew the shuttle.
Flight controllers here looking very carefully at the situation. Obviously a major malfunction.
Roger Beaujolais was an aerospace engineer at Morton Thiokol, the company that built the shuttle's boosters. He was the head of SEAL's task force. It was his job to ensure the SRB joints were firmly sealed.
4, 3, 2, 1, ignition, and liftoff. Liftoff of Discovery, the first flight totally dedicated to Department of Defense mission.
In January 1983, Space Shuttle Discovery's STS-51C mission was launched in temperatures as low as 10 degrees Celsius. When Thiokol retrieved the SRBs, Beaujolais was horrified to discover that the frozen O-rings were less than a millimeter away from getting burned through completely.
I was the person that was there when SRM-15 was disassembled. I was the person that inspected those joints and reported on those joints, took the samples of the blackened grease, characterized the degrees of arc that the blackened grease existed, directed the photographs taken of the joint, took the samples for chemical analysis back to Morton Thiokol for analysis of what the blackened condition actually was, and then prepared the presentations to give to Marshall on the condition of those joints.
So you've had as much first-hand experience as probably anybody else in the field.
That's correct.
Was there an increase in concern in mid-85 as a result of the observations that you and others had made?
Yes, SRM-15 actually increased that concern because that was the first time we had actually penetrated a primary O-ring on a field joint with hot gas. And we had a witness of that event because the grease between the O-rings was blackened just like coal for those arc lengths that were described in the charts. And that was so much more significant than had ever been seen before on any blow-by, on any joint.
When was that flight?
That was a year ago, last January.
He subsequently warned his superiors and NASA never to launch again in such cold weather, because a repeat of such a launch could lead to the destruction of the shuttle and the loss of crew. On the eve of January 27, 1986, Beaujolais and his colleagues made a last-ditch attempt to get NASA to scrub the launch, as January 28 was expected to be -1 degree Celsius. They held a teleconference with Marshall Space Flight Center officials and begged them not to launch in cold weather.
My first knowledge about any temperature concern on the launch was approximately 1 p.m. on the 27th of January. There was a preliminary meeting held to discuss the concern at the low temperature for resiliency, soot blow-by, previous launch, and static test temperatures. And there were there were quite a few people in that meeting, most of whom were engineers, some were program management. I don't remember the names, honestly. Anyways, that meeting concluded with the tempo that there was a valid concern for temperature, low temperature. Also heard sometime afterwards that it had been cold for several days, and what really impressed me about this piece of information was that it was opposite what SRM-15 had experienced. And that concerned me because when I got off the plane a year ago last January for the SRM-15 launch, it was very cold, like 17 or 18 degrees when I got off the airplane at Orlando. The next few days, although it remained cold, it got warmer. And by launch time, like I said, it was probably in the 60s, but it did get warmer. Now, what was concerning me about this piece of information was it was the reverse. it had been cold for several days and it was getting colder. And that's why I noted that, because that just turned the gain up on my concern, because it was away from goodness again. SRM-15 that I'm referring to was the coldest launch up to that point in time. Okay, I felt we were very successful in convincing engineering management of the problem. By now, we heard that the overnight low was predicted to be 18 degrees Fahrenheit. And again, my concern deepened because what I just spoke. It was going in the wrong direction from the past experience base. A telecon was set up with Marshall Space Flight Center and Kennedy Space Center to present data over our concern about the low temperature.
At the telecon session, he presented charts showing the dangers of launching in cold weather, explaining that the O-rings would harden and not seal properly, and of the problems they experienced during the previous mission.